Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about Long Way North. This is the kind of adventure film that Hollywood doesn't really make anymore, and they kind of used to make them. It's very Hergé or Tintin inspired, and very much like French comics or my limited understanding of them. And it's an interesting film because it's a French animated film, but the whole film takes place in Russia, but is in French, not Russian, unless they dubbed it in Russian, which I don't think they have. I actually didn't look that up. I don't know. I mean, they should. That would make sense. But I actually saw the English dub because that was the only one I could get to. These kind of adventure stories were from a time when there were parts of the world that many people felt we had not yet discovered, that there are still wonders of the world that we had not yet experienced, that the thing that little kids would play would be going to the deepest jungles of Africa or going to the Amazon, this whole feeling of adventure on planet Earth and going on a ship and reading Treasure Island and things of that nature. And Long Way North recalls that wonderment without it getting too kind of kitschy or high concept the way, most of the times when we do an adventure film now, it's mainly post Indiana Jones. It's not playing into the adventure thrill of how it used to be. It's using that to do something new. And Long Way North plays it very straight, in fact, which is interesting. You can feel like there's not much character or story there because of how it's written and how it's framed, but it's just kind of glorious going into a previous era's form of storytelling in this kind of storybook style that almost feels very graphic, like you're looking at an old 30s subway kind of a poster. This is directed by Remy Shea, I believe. He was the layout artist on Secret of Kells, and he did some storyboards on Secret of Kells, and he's worked in other animated films, also The Painting, which I never saw, but it has kind of a wonderful style to it. The simplicity of the style and the way it moves, you almost underestimate it in some ways, but that lets it be able to show you wonder more by not expecting something from it. And there's a lot to a great adventure story and a great adventure story of discovery if you've seen a film like Kon-Tiki, or if you've seen any of the great adventure films of classic Hollywood, how much fun those really could be. But Long Way North gets into the fun, it gets into the hard work of an adventure and an epic journey, and it shows you a world through a girl, Sasha, who desperately wants to find her grandfather, who she believes is still in the Arctic, and how she gets there. It makes this a really special animated film. A girl named Sasha who lives in St. Petersburg in the early 20th century, around there. Her grandfather, who's a great explorer, went off to put the Russian flag on top of the North Pole. He's been a great explorer for a long time, and she loved him and loved hearing his stories about his expeditions, and now he went off and never came back, and there's a reward for his ship, but no one has still found it until she goes into his former study and finds notes that show the real route of where the ship was and realizes they were looking for his ship in the wrong place. So she decides, even though she's having a big debutante coming out ball and everything, she tries to convince someone who is close to the Tsar to maybe do it, and then kind of embarrasses herself and her whole family to get the money to go after her grandfather's ship. But then she kind of embarrasses herself and her family, although the guy was just kind of using it to not have to name the library after this old explorer who cost the Russian government lots of money. And so she decides to run away and go on an expedition using the knowledge she has about her grandfather's ship and try to get on a ship and mount an expedition to do that. And after she ends up working at an inn for a month because there are no ships that will take her there, and she had to give away her earrings for passage for a ship, but then that ship left and kind of hoodwinked her. And then when that ship came back and the captain found out that one of his crewmates did, and here's the knowledge that she has and the routes, and decides to mount an expedition to go and find her grandfather's ship, and they go off and go on an adventure as she goes on an expedition to hopefully find her grandfather's ship, get the reward money, and bring pride back to her family and to Russia. This story, or what her grandfather is kind of based on, is Ernest Shackleton's exploits, and specifically diary accounts of how his ship, the Endurance, was trapped in pack ice during one of his attempts to set Arctic records, which was part of what her grandfather was doing. It is semi-based in reality, but I think this is still very much influenced by Hergé and Tintin, and although I like Tintin, I think oftentimes when you're reading it, it doesn't have the most personality. You feel like the main focus of it is the adventure and not the characters, and sometimes that can work, like in Raiders of the Lost Ark. It's clearly really more about the adventure itself other than Indiana Jones, but the sequels obviously didn't do that. Long Way North is kind of interesting in that while I was watching it, and I think a lot of people will second guess it and take it more as more of a Hergé kind of adventure. Even the line reads feel like someone's just like literally reading from the script. Like it feels that way. And I saw the English dub. Some people say the French dub is infinitely better. Some say it's like pretty much the same in terms of the kind of performances, but you know, I didn't see the French version, so I don't know. But I can say for the English dub, performances were like the dialogue was from a very like simply written kind of adventure expedition story, which is kind of what Long Way North is doing. So it kind of works with the whole vibe of the movie, but it is hard to watch that. And I think that's even problems I had with Spielberg's Tintin. You feel like this character has no personality, and Sasha's personality comes through, and she has probably more personality than a lot of the Tintin cartoons display, but it is written in that very Hergé way. But then it kind of surprises you as the film goes on with what it's doing with those characters. It uses it as a jumping off point and takes it to places that I don't think Hergé and Tintin normally would, specifically when things get rough in the expedition. This film gets a little more crazier than you'd think, and I love that about it, but I also love that it plays into that kind of old way of like going to the Arctic was a pretty crazy thing. It was like going to another planet at that time, and it really plays into that. It really felt like this really magical, amazing place through the way it was animated and the sound design and how it was portrayed, and I really like that. It didn't feel like they're like, oh, we're just going to the Arctic where we have a thing or something. It felt like a different world. Like it felt dangerous. It felt like they could die there, and that added to the tension and added to the adventure, and it made me feel like I was on this expedition, and it made you as an audience understand the expedition and how dangerous it was. Now, I think a lot of times, like I saw another film, a French animated film this year called April in the Extraordinary World. Although I like that movie, I think what that movie does is it's very high concept, alternate history kind of thing and all that stuff. And this, I don't know Russian history that well, so I mean, it could be, but to my understanding, it's not. It does it in such a beautiful kind of way. It does feel like an old, fun, like hardcover book you found in the library that you hear is a good adventure book. It feels like Treasure Island kind of a thing in this, and I'm glad it didn't go high concept, because I feel like too many people feel like you need that to grab modern audiences, and I feel like everything that this film does kind of shows that you don't necessarily need that if you have a well told enough story. And the director of this, Remy Shea, I believe, really this is a great feature debut because it shows exactly what you can do as a storyteller. It does remind me kind of what the guys from Kon-Tiki, that they show in their debut that they're great storytellers, and I think this film does a similar thing where it shows you were very good at telling a story in a very kind of, it almost feels like a fill in the blanks kind of a way, but there's a certain amount of confidence in doing that from the director, because I think a lot of people don't, they feel like they have to have a lot of jokes in it. Even like the Mummy movies can't successfully do that. I mean, the Brendan Fraser ones do that without adding in a bunch of things. Long Way North realizes it has a strong enough of a story and plays with its whole storybook way. It's smart because I wasn't underestimating it too much, but with the line reads and everything, you can do that, but then it surprises you by the end with the journey you go through. I love the character of Sasha. I love that she's so willing to keep going and messing up. A lot of times she is right, and she was the only one who is obviously going to find her grandfather's boat, but she also like messes up and makes bad decisions and screws up. She's a human character, you know, giving away those earrings that meant a lot to her, I think emphasizes that as well. She's an interesting character, and there weren't a ton of kids in the audience, but this would be a great film to show kids because it's an easy film for them to get. It's not insanely challenging necessarily, not that it needs to be, but it also shows you a character who's, especially for girls, a strong female character, and a strong female character who knows her mission and what she's trying to do, and that she can screw up and that she's fallible, but she's also a very intelligent young woman as well, and kind of going on an adventure and discovering things, almost like using that framework of a young boy who's going on an expedition but doing a lot more interesting things with it. I love the animation of the dog in particular. I love that design. I like the designs. They're not kind of my personal thing, and I don't think it's very much anything that's going on right now, but I kind of ended up liking that because I was like, you know, you have the Cal Art style, you have the CG style, you have all these various styles that were very well established, even who this director worked for before in Secret of Kells and Song of the Sea, that kind of stuff. So I like that it has its own thing, and I haven't seen many animated films like this. I don't really know what goes on entirely with French animated features over in France, you know, or other places they speak French, but like I was reading like a great, very long storybook or something, the way the style was. But you kind of forget that and get so wrapped up in it that you're not thinking about that as much. But the colors in it really pop out, and I like how it used color within its own character designs, which I thought was very quite beautiful. I think The Long Way North is a very good adventure film, and it's a good adventure film for kids, and I think it's a good adventure film that they can get wrapped up in, because it's mainly about, I think, overall this expedition and this story the way a great adventure film would be. Because a great adventure film is really about what they did, what they accomplished, how did they get from point A to point B, and what the epic journey it was. And Long Way North plays into that so well and does that so well. I don't see many films in general, animated or not, doing that. And Long Way North not only does that, it does that very well. It's probably the best modern film I've seen do that since Kon-Tiki. After I saw it, I kept thinking of Kon-Tiki, because it was like, I can't think of many films that do that as much, but I love seeing those kind of films because we don't get that as much. And I think even with like Kon-Tiki, it did interesting things with it, with those characters, the way they're doing them in such a basic kind of way. You don't think they're going to do something with it, but that almost like lets you establish them in such a great way that you can do something with it, and they take that leverage and do it. And I think Long Way North does that very well. It's a wonderful animated film. A lot of times with, especially I've seen a lot of French animated films, this could play at an AMC or a Regal or a multiplex. It's really ready for that, but for whatever reason it's from a different country, so it plays at the art theater just because, you know, some French people drew it. That's like the only reason, I guess. I don't. It very much feels like a very digestible kind of, it's ready for that kind of a thing, although it's not like anything playing at a multiplex, but it could play to you if you're into that. Don't think because it's a French animated film or a foreign animated film that's like a foreign film that's playing at the art theater that would be challenging. I don't think necessarily it's challenging. This was released by Shout Factory and was actually made by Sacre Bleu Productions, which in my mind went, oh fuck, so they're like super French. I very much love this film. I think it makes me wonder and wistful for the days of classic adventure films and adventure stories, and that kind of classic way to look at the world, and this way of having new technology and steamboats and going and discovering new things and breaking records just because we could, and the curiosity of man, but the amazingness of going on an adventure and building up relationships through that adventure. And Long Way North has all of that to make, not only to make a very good animated film, but to make a really great adventure film that we frankly don't get enough of anymore. Reminded me of the wonderfulness of what a great adventure story could do. So if you have seen Long Way North and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.